I guess can we just start off with a thought on the three new hires, and can you just tell us a little bit about them and maybe the process of bringing them on board?
Yeah, it was obviously a busy end of the year. We play right to the Stanley Cup final, game 6, and then you get into the NHL draft, preparing for that, and then the free agency, and then we tackled on the coaches. And obviously, weren't sure on how many coaches the changes we were going to make or had to make. And obviously, the hire of Glenn Gulletson going to Dallas changed that a little bit. And there was that process. We wanted to wait till the process was done so we knew exactly what we were going to need and fill out our coaching staff, because I think everybody brings a little bit of different elements, and you don't want to have all the same guys, and you need so much energy and analytical thinkers or whatever it is. And I think if we were able to just sit back, wait a little bit while, and then after Glenn was hired, I guess we really moved on with that process on interviewing for all those spots.
Now, I just this is kind of when you came in here, the assistants were already in place. I guess how much did you have a play in bringing these assistants in? And I also wanted to ask you about maybe not having Paul Coffey behind the bench this year. Like, how does that change the dynamic a little bit?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, we'll talk about Paul, and I'm very fortunate to be working with him for the 2 years, and the I inherited him, and it was a very nice inherit. I was happy to be working with him, and in that first year, and we weren't sure if he was coming back for the second year, but luckily for us, he did decide to come back. And throughout the year, we have a lot of conversations, and we added a lot to the coaching staff, and then got to the point where you're not sure when he was gonna step back and just have another role within the organization, or is what he was doing before. And it got to that point where that the change was going to happen. So um I still feel that we'll still have conversations with Paul, and Paul will still give us his impact or his insight on how the team's playing and what we could be doing, which will be a great benefit for our coaching staff, especially with so many new guys coming in. And so now with Paul stepping away, that role, that traditional defensive coach, Mark Stewart is going to slide into that position. So Mark's going to be in charge of the penalty kill and the defenseman. Those are his two main responsibilities. Paul McFarland, who's coming in, will be in charge of the power play, among other things, but that'll be his primary responsibility. And then, of course, there's Peter Aubry, who's coming in as being our goaltending coach.
Thank you. We'll go to Bob Stauffer. Go ahead, Bob Stauffer.
Kris, just circling back to Mark Stewart on the penalty kill. Obviously, he had an awesome run during the playoffs a year ago, but it cratered this year. It wasn't great during the regular season, though it got better as the season went on, but it was middle of the pack. And then it was, let's face it, it was 14th in the playoffs at 67%. Mark's coming back in that role on top of taking on the defense. Is there any thought process, even though you got the same coach, to maybe changing up some of the conceptual things you do? And maybe is it something that needs to be done throughout the organization? How much integration is going to take place in that regard? Obviously, you're going to oversee it. So that's my first question, just on the penalty kill.
Yes, and we had conversations throughout the year about changing up the penalty kill and what we could do differently. And what was really difficult to make the change was, one, obviously seeing the power or the success that we had um, 2 years ago in the playoffs, how well that went. Um, Probably the strongest part of our game going to the Stanley Cup Finals first year was the penalty kill and how good it was for us. And also during the regular season, there was long stretches of time where maybe it wasn't elite, we're top three in the league, but there was probably months where it was probably top five, definitely top 10, where we went months where it was in that. So it was like, all right, it's not um, premier level, but it was still pretty darn good for long stretches of time. And then other times it would just absolutely collapsed. And I would say during during the playoffs, it was underperforming. Um, so this conversation about changing things up has been ongoing for many, many months, and there will be changes to our system. We will be doing things a little bit differently, and there's some things that we can do. Obviously, if we see what other teams are doing, and we'll, exactly what we want. We've got a pretty good idea, but there's a lot of conversations, a lot of analyzing what other teams are doing, and then having those conversations within the coaching staff and moving forward. So I know Mark Stewart has started that process. Obviously he's very familiar with what other teams have done already, but also finding out what type of team we'd have, what penalty killers we'd have going into the next season, and then deciding exactly what that system would be.
All right. Question 2 is about the power play. So under Gulletson, under the last 7 years, it was overall that 7-year run, the number 1 power play in the league. It did drop off a bit this year. You mentioned McFarland's going to run the power play the 3 years in Seattle, and it was an expansion team, but they're kind of middle of the road or a little lower. Just how much detail went into, Paul's sort of background, his time in Florida and Toronto, as well as the stops in the junior tours as well, in terms of discussing conceptually what you're looking for out of the power play with Paul.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of respect for Paul. I think he's an excellent coach, and my time knowing him has gone back. Coaching against him in the Ontario Hockey League, and then also coached with him for a short period of time with Hockey Canada. But I know a lot of coaches who are familiar with him, have spent a lot of time with him, a lot of respect for him. A hardworking guy, brings a lot of enthusiasm to work, and I think that was a good attributes to bring to our team. But another one was just the fact that he's been running an NHL power play for many years. Started in Florida, Toronto, and then Seattle. And obviously, power play success is determined a lot with the personnel that you have. And so, I think he's done a heck of a job on getting the most out of the personnel that he's had. But also very strong is the success that he had with those good power plays in Toronto and Florida. And I feel that he'll be able to bring that over and be able to have a good, strong working relationship with the players that we have on our team right now.
Thank you for that. We'll go to Reed Wilkins. Go ahead, Reed.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, Kris. The goalie coach has been changed. What's the biggest impact, or perhaps just change in approach you would like to see from the new goalie coach?
Well, first of all, Dustin Schwartz has been with the organization for a long time, and I think he is an excellent coach. And I think is a very, very difficult decision to make that change. But in the organization, we're always looking at ways that we can get better, whether that's better on the power play, better on a 5-on-5 play, or defensive group, whatever it is. And we're looking for ways to push our goaltenders and make them better. And overall, there's times where they're exceptional, and there was other times where we were wanting a little bit more from them. And I just think with Peter, he'll be able to push those guys and bring a different perspective, and hopefully elevate them to get those guys to play at their best more often. So I think Peter's been a guy that's spent a lot of time as working in the pro. He's been in the American League for many years. Last couple of years has been down at the college level, but I think he's been ready for an opportunity like this, and we feel that this is the time.
And then my other one, who do you envision being on the bench with you during games? Thank you.
On the bench, we're gonna have one less coach on the bench. It'll be Paul Paul McFarland will be helping with the forwards. He'll be on the bench, and then also Mark Stewart will be on the bench with us. So the only new hire that we've had, I guess, Connor Allen. We haven't talked about Connor Allen. His role will be more on individual player development, more skill based coached, and he'll be a full time coach. He'll be traveling with the team, but he'll be more of an eye in the sky during games. And then Peter will also be a traditional goalie coach role.
Thank you, Kris. We'll go to Jason Gregor. Go ahead, Jason.
Hey, Kris. Was there any discussion with you and Stan about a goalie department with multiple people?
There's been some talk. I guess it's in the development stages of that, but I think that's more of a question for Stan to answer. But right now is just filling that position, our goaltender coach for the Edmonton Oilers right now, and then branching out and seeing how that would look moving forward.
And Kris, you mentioned how you wanted to see who your penalty killers were, maybe, and that would impact kind of the system that you do. You're also going to have some changes. It looks like you're bringing some youth, at least opportunities in Savoy and Howard. How do you look as a coach to want to ensure you give them an opportunity, and where's the balance of giving them an opportunity and knowing they're ready for the opportunity?
Yeah, as a coach, I think the most difficult part of our job is giving players opportunities to play, but also being able to hold them accountable to their play. And there's a fine line on, allowing them to make mistakes, but how many mistakes you allow them to make to able to develop into the player that they can be, but also knowing that you're holding, 20 other players accountable for their play. So it's a very fine line. We're getting, expected to have two young players in our lineup. And, for players like that to be in the lineup, having a significant role, whether that's on special teams or the power play, the penalty kill. Savoy, one thing that very optimistic about is his penalty kill and how good he was in Bakersfield in that role. And, he didn't have any penalty kill time when he played with us, but certainly we saw him being a reliable two-way player at 5-on-5. And, I think that's an opportunity for Savoy is getting a role, especially on the penalty kill. Not that he can't be on the power play, but I definitely see him being having a big part of our penalty kill. Howard is obviously a very offensively gifted player, and probably trying to find him some kind of role with the in the power play. Now, obviously, the first unit power play has been worked so well together for a long period of time, and probably getting his start somewhere in the second unit power play, and building from there. But I think it's important that those guys have some kind of role on the special teams.
Thank you for that, Kris. Looks like we'll go back to Derek Van Diest. If anyone else has any more questions, please feel free to put the raised hand function up, and we'll get to. Other than that, we'll go to Derek Van Diest.
Kris, Stan said earlier this year that he wanted to work on an extension for yourself. I was just wondering where that process is right now, and would you be obviously comfortable going into coaching this year without an extension?
That's up to the organization. There's been some slight talks about that. Right now, the primary focus was filling out the coaching staff, getting them under contract, and then moving forward with myself. So I want to be here in Edmonton for a long period of time. And, as a coach, you always want security and having that. And, hopefully throughout the summer, we'll move forward with that. But right now, as I said, the primary focus was finding the coaching staff, getting them under contract, and then hopefully I'd be next.
Thanks, Kris.
Looks like we'll go back to Jason Gregor for one more.
Kris, what do you know, or what can you tell us about David Tomasek and where you see him potentially fitting in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, here's a player that I've only, of all the players, I'm probably most unfamiliar with him or Howard, just because they haven't been in the NHL. They haven't been with our organization for very long. And, I've watched a little bit of the video on him, but, finding what his role is. And, there's so many unknowns on, one thing I do like about our team this year is we've got a lot of options to play at center. I think having players that have some, you know, fluidity to their game, whether they're playing left wing, right wing, center. But I think it's important to have more centers because it's easier to get a centerman to play the wing than it is to get a winger to play the center. So here's a guy, Tomasek, who, I feel it could be a right winger or centerman. Where exactly in the lineup, I'm not sure. Maybe up, obviously, in Europe, he was having a lot of success in a top six role, providing a lot of offense. Now, can that translate to the NHL? Time will tell. But, I think early in the season, especially in exhibition, giving him a lot of opportunities to find his game and finding out where he best fits in our team. Because we have a lot of unknowns. The centerman, does Nugent Hopkins play center? Is he a left winger? Adam Henrique, very similar situation. Um, um, Trent Frederick, is he a centerman or is he a right winger? There's a lot of unknowns, and I guess we gotta find out what's best for our whole team.
And
Thank you, Kris.
Curtis
We'll go to
Lazar-
Kevin Carey. Oh, go ahead.
Curtis Lazar, Kris, he spoke about how he feels he can play center or wing, and he said that was part of the excitement here when he talked to you. That you said, "Hey, I don't want to just be a fourth line center per se. If you think you need me on the wing, I'll play on the wing." You mentioned you have a lot of guys who can play both. Do you expect then to kind of experiment on lots of different combinations early in the season?
Yeah, the conversation I had with Lazar was that he very comfortable playing any position, and he felt some of his best hockey was playing left wing. It is nice to have to know that we've got a right-handed centerman for those D zone faceoffs, whether it's on the penalty kill or 5-on-5, and him bringing that element. So that's nice for a coach to have, knowing that he's on the bench and he can come out and do that. Another thing is he can be part of the penalty kill. That could be a big part of his role. Whether, we develop, there's so many unknowns on what our team's going to look like. And, if you're developing is he just a utility guy where he's face off some penalty kill and he's playing 6 to 10 minutes a night, or maybe even a little bit more, where maybe he's on a third line and he's part of a shutdown line where he's either the centerman or a winger on that line. I see him or going into the year right now, I feel comfortable that he's kind of filling out one of those two roles.
Thank you, Kris. We'll go to Kevin Carius of Sports 1440.
Will you miss and what will you miss about him not on your staff, and how much did he help your transition to become a head coach in the NHL?
Sorry, Kevin, I missed the first part, but I assume you were talking about Paul Coffey.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, no, Paul was a huge addition to our coaching staff, and I think it was a lot on the just giving us the perspective on, here's a guy that's been a part of the game for so long, whether it's been a player or part of management or just a spectator, and having a good feel for the game on what needs to be addressed, and a lot of it on what needs to be addressed from a player's perspective on what they need to hear and what we need to do to allow them to be successful. There's a guy that I shared, his office was right next to mine, so we crossed paths a lot and we had a lot of conversations. And a lot of those conversations, a lot of times going into a talk, not necessarily this is the problem, this how are we going to solve it. It was just more of having a conversation about hockey and then developing some ideas and finding out what the perspective was from the other coaches or the other players or whatever it was, and then moving forward with a plan. So, um, I think, looking at his track record, I think he did an outstanding job getting the most out of our defensemen as a group, getting the most out of each guy playing at their best most nights. I hopefully that, he's not around full time and he's not on the bench next year, but hopefully he's around our team and I can continue to have those conversations and, build and learn because I certainly did a lot over these past 2 years.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll go to Bob Stauffer for our final question of the day.
Kris, Stan Bowman added Isaac Howard, and you guys had Matt Savoy percolating in the minors. They're both 21 this year. I think a lot of us felt that the team lost some youth and pace and tempo from the 24 playoff run to the start of last year. Just a thought of the deployment of both Howard and Savoy. And as a coaching staff, are you guys going to have to maybe be able to live with the fact that they might make an occasional mistake as they transition into the National Hockey League?
Well, absolutely. There's going to be mistakes. Even our most seasoned veterans make mistakes, and it'd be silly to think that they're just going to come in and um, the transition is going to be seamless and they're going to be impact NHL players right from the start. So we know that there's going to be some hiccups, and I think within the organization, there's a lot of belief that these are key players. And you think about what we gave up to get these players, Ryan McLeod to get Savoy, we traded our last first round pick, who we felt was going to fill that third line role to get Howard. But the belief is that they were going to come in very quickly to be impact players. And to do that, we have to give them opportunities to become that and to develop that. So, ideally, we would love to have Howard, Savoy being able to play in the top six immediately and have impact, and understanding there'd be some mistakes and moving forward, but they're just going to continue to get better. And hopefully that is the case. But we know there'll be some, as you said, hiccups. But as from the organization standpoint, we got a lot of belief in these guys. And so to give up O'Reilly to get Howard, well, we got a belief that Howard can be a impact player and can help us sooner than later. And for them to do that, we have to give them those opportunities.